last 10. Carr tips it in and it's Waller. He spins into the end zone for the touchdown. Watching greatness on one end in LeBron. There's a dude with 35 in white getting it done defensively and then offense taking over the fight. Mama, there goes that man.
They have shared a brilliant championship battle, but the championship can only be won by one, and it's going Dutch in 2021. Max Verstappen, for the first time ever, is champion of the world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this week's edition of the Waterboy Experience. I am your host, the Waterboy himself, Davis McLemore, and we kind of have a hell of a show here for you. You might like it, you might not, but that remains to be seen. This week, we're going to talk about some NFL standings in each of the different conferences and their divisions and whatnot. We're going to talk about a few big players going on in the NFL right now. The Chicago Bears finally won a game. We thought it was going to come a lot later than it actually did, and then we're going to go over the Formula One race, and here to dissect all that with me here is my good friend, the CEO and CFO of Night Productions, a Red Bull chugging son of a gun, Mr. Jason Shaddix. Jason, how are you?
Boy, you were sucking wind at the end with that, weren't you?
Man, I was sucking something. Oh, no, cut that part out. I wasn't.
I'm already going to cut like over 1,000 things. This might not be one of them just for the sake of my sanity when editing this bullshit we call a podcast.
Yeah, that's fair. You're gonna have your work cut out for you on this one here. We were originally gonna do something a little bit different here tonight. We were going to do a kind of a live review or a live reaction to, as we're recording, the Monday Night Football game between the Raiders and the Packers. But since the NFL's streaming rights are all kinds of confused and mixed up here, we don't really know what to watch it on. And I bet you even if we could find something to watch it on, I probably don't pay for that subscription. But instead, Jason here is going to ask me a few questions. It looks like he wants to run down all of the standings in the NFL, and we're going to talk about who we think by the end of the season is going to be the big winners, who we think is dominating the divisions. And I'm going to let you pull out your little device here, and that's a pretty little device there. I'm talking about your phone. Yeah, there you go. That's right. And we're going to go over all of those. So go ahead.
I'll have you know that my device is perfectly average. No, but in all seriousness, let's review these teams. Let's review the conferences, and let's see a little bit of what you think about them and who you think it's going to be the team that wins that division and the team that's definitely going to lose that division. So we'll start in the way the NFL presents it by going with the AFC West. My bad, the AFC East. We have the Miami Dolphins with a record of 4-1, the Bills with a 3-2, the Jets with a 2-3, and the former Golden Boys of the NFL, the New England Patriots, 1-4. Now, let me ask you this, though. What do you think about the Patriots dynasty dying out after Brady? Because in this past weekend, we saw them get annihilated by the Saints. Now, I know last week you said, well, it was a bigger loss last week because they went like 40-something-3, but this time they went 31-0. Not a single point for the Patriots.
Well, I've been hearing a lot of talks about it. A lot of people want Mac Jones gone, which I like Mac Jones. I think he's a decent quarterback. I liked him when he was in Alabama. But even when he was coming out of Alabama, the only thing that made him look good that year that they won the national championship was the weapons he had around him. I mean, you look, they had Devontae Smith, who is now on the Jets. You had Henry Ruggs. You had Josh Jacobs. You know, so many of these big name players that have gone on and proven themselves. Well, Henry Ruggs, not so much, but they've gone on and they've proven themselves to be elite athletes. Mac Jones has not done that. And so ultimately what I think it is Bill Belichick's system is not meshing well with Mac Jones. And this is very, very unusual of Bill Belichick and the Patriots to see them go back-to-back weeks with such big losses. I think what you need now, and Bill Belichick, maybe this is time for him to start winding things down. Maybe it's time for him to start maybe looking into new adventures and just bring the book to a close and let's start rebuilding towards the next dynasty. So that's where I think that they're at. They need just a full overhaul, rebuild. It's time to let the old guys go and let's get new people in.
Do you think that they're going to be the worst team and the team that loses out in the AFC West now that we've kind of talked a little bit? Do you think now that we've talked a little bit about, last week's game, do you think they're going to be the worst team in the AFC West?
AFC East.
God damn it!
You'll get there someday. No, honestly, looking at the rest of the teams in this division, yes, absolutely, because the Jets are showing some promise. The Bills are stacking up to be one of the better teams in football, period. And, and they beat the Dolphins that are number one in the division already. So between the Bills and the Dolphins, it's a toss up because I feel like if the Bills can get one more good win over the Dolphins, maybe, the Dolphins win a few games here. Bills need to keep winning. I think they can turn the tide and the Bills can overtake the Dolphins in this division. Now, if the Bills continue to be inconsistent and have struggles, it doesn't matter how many times they beat the Dolphins. If the Dolphins have a better record, obviously they're going to the playoffs over the Bills. The Jets are one of those teams I think could be a wild card. Now that we have 3 wild card teams, I think the Jets are one of those teams that if Zach Wilson can continue to improve week over week, maybe they can start putting some things together and, squeeze in there. And then the Patriots are not going anywhere. It's just sad to say. But yeah, that's what I think about the AFC East.
I do agree with you that if Zach Wilson can stay a little bit more consistent and start winning more games, that they'll be a little bit better. I think just because they expected Aaron Rodgers to be their golden boy, they're having to readjust everything to him. And that's why right now they're 2-3. And even though they just won their last game against the Broncos, which of course it's the Broncos, 31-21, I think Zach Wilson is finding his feet. And I think if the team puts a little bit more hope in him and he realizes, okay, this is my big chance right now to make amends for my past mistakes, for my childishness, and start winning again, I think they will have a better record. I think they will go probably, well, I can't say how many games they're going to win, but I think they're going to have more wins than losses. And I kind of do agree with you that the Bills are going to win that division and overtake the Dolphins, because the biggest issue that the Dolphins had, and I've always say this, as long as Tua is healthy, they're going to be okay. But the last few years, we've seen Tua suffer from concussions, different types of injuries, and that's the biggest thing. If he's out, they're out. So time will tell, but if history is anything to go by, I think the Dolphins halfway through their season are going to lose Tua again. And they're going to go down and the Bills are going to win. Not to say, yeah, they're going to win their division, the Bills are, but at the same time, we've seen how inconsistent they are. Like, sometimes they'll play, we've seen how inconsistent they are. And sometimes they're like the best team in the NFL. And then other times, especially in the playoffs, when it matters, they drop the ball. And, a lot of people are getting tired of this Bill overhype train. And they're like, they're never going to win. They're the new Dallas Cowboys, except they actually go further into, the playoffs. But how many years now have they gone and they've not won their championship and gone to the Super Bowl? Quite a few. But anyway, let's move on from that and let's talk about the next conference, the AFC North. Right now we have the Steelers. Surprisingly, the Steelers leading the division 3-2. The Ravens 3-2, the Browns 2-2, and the Bengals 2-3.
Well, just running down the list of teams here, none of these teams are really fantastic. None of these teams, I think even the number 1 seed of this division, once they get into the playoffs, I think one of these teams is going to go out first. Now, if I'm picking the best team out of this entire division, I'm looking at the Ravens. I don't know how the Steelers are up there, honestly, but the Steelers have had very, very big problems being unproductive on the offensive side of the ball, and you're not going to make it deep into the playoffs doing that anyway. So I feel like the bottom will fall out. We've seen with the Bengals this year, the bottom already has fallen out. I don't know. A lot of people are saying that the Bengals are eventually going to come back and they're going to take back over the division. Is it too late for that? And of course, the Browns are the Browns. I don't really have any faith in the Browns. I see the Ravens being the number one team in this division and making the first seed in the playoffs. Not the number one seed in the AFC, but you know what I mean. But I don't see any of these other teams even making it into a wild card slot. I think we're going to have two teams from the AFC East in the wild card slot. I think we could have Bills come in number 1, Dolphins come in number 2, and then the Jets come in number 3. I think in the wild card slots, we can have Dolphins and Jets, and then another team, which we'll talk about in a minute.
I think the people are kind of getting tired of the Ravens because Lamar Jackson, was always touted to be this amazing and great quarterback up to the same level as Jalen Hurts. But he hasn't produced much. He's been injured a few, and he just, especially this past offseason where there was contract disputes and he wasn't getting what he wanted or he was asking for too much. I think the fans in general are just tired of hearing the same old thing, the same old promises. And yeah, they're going to win their division. I do believe that too. I think they're going to win it. But at the same time, it's like you said, it's not a great division. There's not a lot of great teams. The Steelers are a fucking joke. It's just who's the best out of this motley crew of teams. I think that's the best way to describe the Ravens and describe this just entire conference.
Nicest guy in prison.
Yeah, the nicest guy in prison. Anyway, we're going to move on from the AFC North, and we're going to move on to the AFC South, where leading their division is the Jacksonville Jaguars 3-2, the Colts 3-2, the Texans 2-3, and the Tennessee Titans 2-3 again. So we have two ties for the bottom and the top, no in between. Which, if you think about it, perfectly describes each of one of these teams. You're either the top or you're the bottom, but there's no in between. You're not having a mid-season. Everything is just either good or bad. But in the end, I think it's all mediocre for this conference. But let me get your thoughts on it.
So, looking at the list of teams, I love the Indianapolis Colts right now. The energy in the stadiums and they found a song and all that different. I don't know how it goes, but, they found a song and the fans are getting excited about Indianapolis Colts football again. But this Anthony Richardson injury that just happened this past week, yesterday, as we're talking about it, that may put a damper on things. And you also have the question of, well, when will Jonathan Taylor come back? And so there's a lot of uncertainties right now, but hopefully Anthony Richardson isn't out for that long. He's been a star this year. So far, he's probably my rookie of the year. If Jonathan Taylor can come back and not be a drama queen about money, and he wasn't a drama queen about money, but he deserves it, but if he can just be a team player, then I think this Indianapolis Colts team by far is going to be the best team in the AFC South. So, number 1 overall, I'm taking the Colts. And I think it's interchangeable between any of the other 3 teams for who's the worst. But all honesty, the Titans are just not working right now. There's no looking up at the sun hoping. At least the Jacksonville Jaguars have Trevor Lawrence. At least the Houston Texans have CJ Stroud. But Titans have nothing. They just have Derrick Henry. That's their game plan. That's all their team revolves around. So, and I mean, they have a decent defense, but, a decent defense can only take you so far. So, I think the Colts are taking number 1 of the division, and none of these other teams are even breaking into the playoffs.
I remember in the offseason, you were talking about Anthony Richardson and how he should have been, especially when there was this whole debacle of, is Jimmy G going to be able to play for the Raiders? And you're like, we should have gotten Anthony Richards. He looks like a really great prospect. Looking at him playing the last few weeks, especially, I have an article right here, and it says that He has a right shoulder injury, specifically an AC joint injury. So he's going to miss some time out, but this marks the third time in 5 weeks that he has been sidelined due to some kind of injury. Now, do you think this is a bad sign? Because he is a first round pick. This is a rookie right now. And yes, he's got a lot of potential, but you've been sidelined half the time because of some type of injury. Do you think he's injury prone, and you think like this is something that's just a hiccup in his career? Or do you think this is something that's going to keep on following him, and at some point you're just going to have to decide to cut your losses with this first round pick, and it's not working out because he's too injury prone?
I don't think this is a good sign for the Indianapolis Colts or for Anthony Richardson, because it's like you said with Tua earlier, as long as he's healthy, he can ball out with the best of them. But if he's not healthy throughout the season, he's going to struggle. Now, we're seeing Anthony Richardson play at a high level even through some of these injuries, which is great. But imagine if you were able to keep him 100%. The big thing I think it needs to come down to is he needs to, and he's a rushing quarterback. That's just who he is. But if he can turn that down and not take as many risks and protect himself, I think he'll preserve his career for longer. Now, honestly, another thing that always helps is investing in your offensive line. Getting the ball out quick and keeping him from getting under contact is another thing. I think it's a bad sign, but there are ways to work around it because he is a good talent and he's worth every penny you're paying him. But you need to find ways to adapt around keeping him safe, keeping him protected, maybe letting him learn to take some of those tough hits and just beat it into him, So that's what I think.
All right, we're going to move on to apparently the division that earlier in the show I could not get my mind off, and that's the AFC East. No, I'm kidding. It's the AFC West. I just wanted to get a giggle out of you. So this division, I think the best way to describe it is it has some of the worst teams in the NFL, and yet it has one of the best teams in the NFL.
Two of the best teams.
No, I do not think it's two of the best teams. I don't know if you could hear that off microphone for Davis. He thinks the Chargers are a really good team, but if you look at their stats, and I'll just say it in a minute, they just seem like okay. They just seem like that middle team, but all right. You're getting anxious. All right, let me just give you the win-loss ratio first. So obviously leading this division, and probably they're going to win the entire thing again, is the Kansas City Chiefs with a record of 4 wins and 1 loss. You have the Chargers, who are in the middle, 2 wins, 2 losses. All right, respectable. Then you have the Las Vegas Raiders. They have 1 victory with 3 losses. And now you have the Broncos, who have 1 victory and 4 losses. And for the Raiders, their 1 victory came at beating the Broncos. So who do you think is going to take that top crown of being the worst team in your conference? Is it going to be the Raiders or is it going to be the Broncos? Because both of you guys are pretty bad. There's no denying about that. I don't know what they're doing in the Broncos that's so shit, but they're doing something. We know what's going on with the Raiders and McDaniels and his shitting calls, and it doesn't look like it's going to get better anytime soon. And tonight, right now, they're playing the Packers, and as of 7:44, I'm going to give the score. So far, the Packers are leading by 3 points in the first quarter with 2 minutes and 38 seconds left on the clock. Now,
who has the ball?
Well, I don't know who has the ball. We were going to watch this game live as it was happening.
No, usually on Google, there's an indicator of who has the ball, but I don't see it on there. So anyway.
Well, they're probably at a timeout or something like that, or in commercial break, something like that. But like going back to my question, who do you think is going to be the worst overall this year? Is it going to be the Broncos or is it going to be the Raiders? Because if the Raiders end up going worse than the Broncos, that's probably going to put them at the very bottom of the NFL.
So, I mean, number one is the Chiefs. It's going to be, I hate to say it and I hate to see it. Number one is going to be the Chiefs by far. But we were talking about that other wild card spot that's available that I said the Dolphins and the Jets might take. If there's any other team that I think could possibly take it that I'm kind of not pulling for, but that I believe could, it's the Chargers. The Chargers are not a great team. They're a good team. They're good enough to make it. And I mean, when you look at all the other teams in the other divisions, well, there's not much competition here. So between the two worst, I mean, it's just about which organization is the most clusterfucked, which one is the most, what words am I looking for here? Just who's the most unprofessional, who's the most toxic, that's all it comes down to here. Because at the end of the day, both of these teams have great players, great talent. I'm not saying all of the players on the teams are great players and great talents. Both of them have quarterback problems, but both of the two teams have problems with internally getting along and being on the same page, and neither team has established a winning mindset. And I mean, we only beat them by 1 point, but they scored a victory over the Bears, who have their own problems. I think, personally, as a Raider fan, it's just our luck. They're going to take that number 1 spot from us. That's just the way it always goes. We will be dead last. And so I think the order specifically for the AFC West will be Chiefs, Chargers, Broncos, Raiders. And I hope it is, because you know what? That's just more of a reason to get McDaniels out of there.
Now, last year, and I'm going to tie it up all this together. Now, last year, we saw a bunch of teams replace their head coaches midway through the season. The most famous one, I think it was either the Panthers or the Colts. They replaced their coach with, what was his name? Jeff Saturday, the high school coach, and his only win that season came at beating the Raiders. I always love to just rub that in your face. But what I'm asking is, do you think we're going to see either team fire their head coach midway through the season? Do you think we're going to see McDaniels get the boot? Or do you think we're going to get to see Sean Payton get the boot? Or hell, in a beautiful world, in a perfect world, it would be both. But do you think we're going to see that? Or are the owners of these organizations too stubborn to realize that these experiments failed?
I think you could watch green paint turn black before either one of these teams fired their head coach. Because look at how much they're paying each guy, Sean Payton versus Josh McDaniels. Neither organization is going to admit that they fucked up. And granted, this is Sean Payton's first year. He has a little bit more of a cushion to fall back on. Josh McDaniels does not. Now, Sean Payton is a Super Bowl winning head coach. He also has that going for him. Josh McDaniels has more Super Bowl rings, but not as a head coach. And Sean Payton is probably a future Hall of Fame head coach. So he also has that going for him. If I'm the Broncos, I would fire everyone else and just keep Sean Payton and let him do what he does best. Because I think that's the biggest problem with the Broncos is you have too many things going on, too many egos that are clashing right now, and none of them are on the same page. But Josh McDaniels, keep everyone else and just fire Josh McDaniels. And Patrick Graham. Let's go ahead and get Patrick Graham out of there. Because he's not a great defensive coordinator either. So that's what I think.
Before we move on, I will say that this is a rough estimate, but Josh McDaniels is making roughly around $10 million at the Raiders. And Sean Payton, as you said, he's a Super Bowl winning head coach. He is raking up $18 million. Personally, I think it's too much for these men. I know Sean Payton has had, a Super Bowl win as a head coach, but I think it's sort of like Bill Belichick. He's at the end of his career, and right now you said, he's going to be a Hall of Famer head coach. If it keeps on going the way it's been going with the Broncos, I think this might be a really bad mark on his career and might make him ineligible. I mean, if we're going off just this season so far, boy, he's not looking like he's a Hall of Famer now, is he? That's just something I wanted to mention. Now, let's move on to the next conference, which is the National Football Conference, and we'll start with the NFC East. Now the Eagles are leading this division 5-0. Very impressive from them. The Dallas Cowgirls are second, going 3-2, followed by the Washington Commanders 2-3, and the New York Giants going 1-4. Now, last year, the Giants, I thought, were a tremendous team. I thought they were really good, and it's like they've taken 2 steps forward last year, and they just went back 20 steps because this is not the same team this year. It's a completely different team to the way they were operating last year, and it's just fucking ridiculous. Last year, all I kept on saying was, those New York teams, man, they have something cooking because they are fucking great.
We saw it with one of them.
Yeah, we saw it with one of them, but not anymore. That's not the case. The Jets are questionable. The Giants are complete putts. And only the Bills are worthy of being called a great team. And even that is questionable. I don't think I even have to ask you at this point who you think is going to win that division and who you think is going to lose that division. Unless something happens where the Giants win every single fucking game from now till the end of the season, I don't see them going anywhere. And the Eagles, they're going to lose. They're going to lose a game or two. I mean, no team can go an entire season undefeated. But I think we can both agree that the Eagles are going to win that division and that the Giants are going to lose.
Actually, my predictions are the Commanders for number 1 in the division and Sam Howell for league MVP. I'm joking, of course. There's no question it's going to be the Eagles. You know, Jalen Hurts, he's doing what he's doing. He's slinging that ball around, and they're one of the most productive teams in the league right now. Basically, with everyone else kind of touch and go. Now, the one good thing about this is, I believe, one of the first times, if last year was not the first time, that the Dallas Cowboys have not been number 1 in this division. I think that's a good thing, because how many times have they gone on to the playoffs and got out in the first round? They never represented this division very well for the past 10 or so years. Now we're looking at the Eagles taking over this division, and they can represent. They can go toe-to-toe with the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs of the world. And I'm digging this. And they're one of my favorites to win the Super Bowl this year. I think the Cowboys could get a wild card spot in. Everywhere else, I mean, you know how it goes. It is what it is.
I also want to quickly mention just kind of how schizophrenic the Cowboys fans are, because yesterday they lost against the 49ers in a humiliating 42-10. And I was seeing so many posts online of Cowboy fans completely losing their shit. I saw one guy, I think at the game, grabbed a mop and put his jersey on the ground and started cleaning the floor with I think it was a Dax Prescott jersey.
What the fuck?
And the thing I don't understand, and I've talked to this with our friend Nate, who lives in Texas, and he hates the Cowboys with a burning passion in him. But we were talking about it, and it's like, why are these fans so delusional? Because at the end of the day, history has shown that you're not even going to make it out of the first round of the playoffs. Like, it's not even, oh, you're just a hater. No, like, you have a record of not doing that for the last 25 years. And yet you get a couple of wins. You're not even going like the Eagles and 5-0. No, you're going 3-2. So, which is not bad. It's not bad overall. But you lose your second game, and immediately the fans are like, oh, fuck Dak Prescott, fuck him, and all that. I think the whole mentality with the Cowboys, like the fans, I don't think they watch or support their team because they love their team. I think they just do it because they want to have a reason to act like children and throw tantrums. Because otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. A lot of teams go 3-2, and you don't see a lot of their fans acting like that. I'm sure there are some fans who will act like that on every team, but for the majority of people, they're not delusional. They don't think, oh yeah, we're winning a few games, we're gonna go to the Super Bowl, we're gonna win, yeah, it's our year, yeah. No, most of them probably think, give it a minute. Yeah, just give it a minute, and You'll see. It's been like that every year. But anyway, let's move on from them and let's go and talk about my favorite division, the NFC North, where the Las Vegas Raiders are where the Detroit Lions are leading the division with 4 wins and 1 loss, followed by the Green Bay Packers, 2 wins and 1 loss, which might change after tonight. It might be 3 wins or it might be 3 losses. And then there's the Bears, who are 1-4, but they're not at the bottom of the pack. That honor goes to the Minnesota Vikings, which again, it's sort of like the Giants. Last year, the Vikings came out and they won their first game, which hadn't happened in a very long time. And then they were doing pretty good throughout the season, and now they're doing a Giants. Everything has completely fallen apart with that division, with that team. But what do you think?
In the past, this has really been Green Bay's division. But this year, coming off of the first week, they made a statement win against the defending world champs, the Chiefs, and the Lions are sitting really pretty at 4-1. This is their division now. There's no slow takeover process. No, this is their division. Now, are we ready to completely buy into them being Super Bowl contenders? Not just yet, but something magical is going on in Detroit right now. And I'm loving it. You're ecstatic about it. You're crazy about it. But I also think that it's weird that as soon as you started liking this team, then they started getting good. When you first brought them up, you were like, I asked you, I was like, well, who, if you had to pick a favorite NFL team, who would your favorite be? And you were like, the Detroit Lions. And I was like, really? And then now look where they're at. And so they're building something great over there in Detroit. Every other team in that division, I mean, the Vikings are not terrible. They just have a lot of holes they need to plug. They have great talent on that team. I think Kirk Cousins is pretty decent quarterback. I don't want to say he's elite yet. They got Justin Jefferson over there. He's a great wide receiver. I think if he had a big name quarterback behind him, he would be the best wide receiver in the league. And I'm including Devontae Adams in that scenario too. But they need to get something figured out here. In the long run, maybe not even at the end of this season, I think we'll see the Lions at number 1 and the Vikings at number 2. Because both of those teams have promise. And the Vikings have been in that rebuilding, almost there, just not quite yet. They've been in that phase a lot longer than the Lions have. And honestly, the Vikings are getting tired of being that. They've always been that number 2 team in that division right behind the Packers. And they're tired of it this year. And so I think as the next couple seasons go on, we're going to see some dogfights between the Vikings and the Lions. So get excited for that, because that's going to be good football. And then, the Bears are the Bears. They had a great showing this past week. Fantastic. I don't know what's going on over there, but they showed a lot of promise in that one game. Now, are they going to continue that for the rest of the season? I do not think so. But when you have DJ Moore just put up ridiculous numbers. He had 3 touchdowns. And you have Justin Fields, who's a young stud. He needs guidance behind him. I think they can build to be another good contender in that division. Packers are out of it. I'm just going to say that flat out. I think the Packers are out of it. I think they've put up way too much faith in Jordan Love. Let's move them down to the bottom. So right now, Lions, Vikings, Bears, Packers.
Yeah, I do find it funny, going back to what you said, that I started watching and liking the Lions and they instantly started to become good. Same thing happened with Red Bull in 2020. I was starting to root for them. Next year, Max Verstappen won the world championship. I'm not saying I had anything to do with it, but that's too coincidence, all right? No, but in all seriousness, I think that the reason why the Lions are starting to become so good is Dan Campbell. Everything revolves around him being the right coach for that team. I've always said he's not the best football-minded coach. He's not by a long shot. But he's everything that team needs. He's the morale boost. He's what gets them up every morning. And we're starting to see that tree bear some fruits. Now, I don't think, and I'm not delusional and say, we're going to go to the Super Bowl. No fucking way. We're not even contenders. I'll be happy if we go to the playoffs because we did win our game last year against the Packers last year, and we're going to go to the playoffs. And then at the last minute, I think the Steelers won their game, and then
That has nothing to do with them.
No, I can't remember what team won, and then we were like kicked out, and it was like, oh shit. But we still won our last game. That was going to somewhat determine if we go to the playoffs. So I think the Lions have a lot of potential in going to the playoffs and maybe winning the first round, maybe the second round, but I don't see us advancing a lot further. Now, give it a few seasons. I do believe that maybe Dan, with the right players and just that charisma that he has, that ability to draw the best out of all his players, I think we're going to see them make a run for it. I'm not saying we're winning, not by a long shot. Again, history has said the Lions have not won a Super Bowl since the NFL became a thing. They won the Super Bowl before the NFL became the NFL.
It wasn't even the Super Bowl, it was just the NFL championship.
Yeah, the NFL championship, but that's the equivalent of it. But like I said, I think they're going to be a really great team to watch out for, root for. I don't know if we're ever going to be Super Bowl winners. I would love to see my boys in blue hold that championship up high and proud. They definitely deserved it. But for the meantime, if you're a Lions fan, just enjoy it. Just enjoy finally not being the joke of the NFL. Davis will now feel that for the next few years until McDaniels gets the boot.
I'm already feeling it.
But they're going to be a really great team, and just watch out for them. That's all I got to say. Now we're going to move on to the NFC North. Fucking hell. The NFC South, in which the Buccaneers are leading their division 3-1, followed by the Falcons 3-2, followed by the Saints 3-2, and then, based on the stats, the worst team in the NFL so far is the Carolina Panthers, going 0-5. God damn, that's something. But here's the thing. The Panthers, they suck. There's no denying anything about it. But you don't hear them being brought up as one of the worst teams in the NFL. Like, that dishonor goes to the Browns, to the Broncos, to the Raiders. But you don't really hear people on social media saying, oh, this is the shittiest team in the NFL, period. Like, that's not even up for debate. I think maybe they're going through a slump. I know last year they went through quarterback after quarterback, but maybe like this is just another slump. Maybe they'll end up being a little bit higher in their conference. But an interesting thing is, and I was talking to our friend Nate, who's a big fan of the Atlanta Falcons, if the Falcons win their next game and we beat the Bucs, as we're going to play them next week, they're going to lead their division if we win against the Buccaneers. And I'm pretty confident about that. I think
It's a winnable game.
It's a winnable game. So I'm not saying we're going to win, but you know what, Nate? If we win, you owe us because we took that victory away from the Buccaneers. But what do you think?
I think none of these teams are put together completely just yet. You know, Baker Mayfield is doing a pretty good job as the Buccaneers quarterback. Derek Carr, this is the first year with the Saints. And I've told a lot of Saints fans this, that, you know, they'll go, thank you for your quarterback. And I'll be like, yeah, whatever. But I'll tell them, look, we tried the Dennis Allen and Derek Carr combo before. It didn't work. I'm just warning you. So Dennis Allen was Derek Carr's first head coach when he was drafted to the Raiders. Josh McDaniels is terrible. Right ahead of him was Dennis Allen. And so the Saints have to put something together here where they need to design an offense to where Derek Carr is essentially running it. Because that's when our offense was working the best, was when Derek Carr was really making the decisions. And, you know, he had input from his coaches like, well, maybe let's not do that, let's do this. But ultimately, Derek Carr was the one calling the plays out there. He was the one deciding what to do. Now, there's also the possibility of, well, if they keep Josh Jacobs any longer than this season, Devontae Adams is probably going to be out, and he's probably going to go play with the Saints. That's just it. If I'm Devontae Adams, that's the only thing that makes sense. Because what's the only reason that you went to the Raiders? You wanted to go to the Raiders to play for your not former best friend. He was your best friend in college, your roommate, and you wanted to win Super Bowl with him. And looking at that roster at the time, you were thinking you could. But you go to the Saints. you're not the only big target over there. You've got Chris Olave, you've got Alvin Kamara if he can stay out of trouble. And that Saints defense is phenomenal. We saw how they just decimated the Patriots last week. Granted, it's the Patriots, but that's a good defensive performance there. I think the Saints over the next season or two can really build something up here. Even by the end of this year, I feel like they can start making a comeback and make a deep run because they're not that far behind. No, it's anybody's game here except for the Panthers. This is not the Panthers' game. And the Panthers are really in that rebuilding phase. They need to find a general identity. They need to find, and maybe Bryce Young is that guy, maybe he's not, but they need to establish a winning culture there. The Saints are working on it. The Falcons are working on it too, because this whole contention with the Buccaneers is giving the Falcons hope here. And so, I don't know. I'm looking at the top three teams, Buccaneers, Falcons, and Saints. It can really go to any one of those three teams if any one of those can stay consistent. And so, it's hard for me to say for this one, but the absolute worst team in this division is the Panthers, period. But the number one is interchangeable between all the top three. It's anybody's game.
I think that division will be something to look out for just to see who's the best out of that conference. Like you said, they're not particularly good, but
let me just say, none of those teams are stellar, but all of those teams are rebuilt. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And we were looking back at last year. None of these teams were good. So it'll be interesting to see who comes out on top in the long run.
I do believe, though, that if Davante Adams does continue to want to play football after being with the failed experiment that was the Raiders, if he goes to the Saints, I think that might be the key to push him to be a lot better. Because we saw that as soon as he left Green Bay, everything that I always said about Aaron Rodgers not being good enough came to fruition. Because we saw him lose and lose and lose. And I just kept on saying, well, look, I know Davante's not doing so hot at the Raiders, but we know what the issue was there. With the Green Bay Packers, it's the fact that Davante left. That's their biggest thing. I mean, of course, there's always things. A lot of teams are always getting better, but they were always consistently the best in their division. Now they're not. They're nowhere near close, and Rodgers is gone, and he went to the Jets out the first game.
7th place.
Yeah, 7th place. But I think if Davante goes to the Saints, I think that's going to be really interesting. I'm not saying they're going to go to the Super Bowl or something like that, but I'm saying they're going to be very interesting. And if they can finish rebuilding and fix their issues, I think they might have a really good, solid team. I think a team that people from New Orleans can be happy to say, yeah, that's my fucking team right there. That's the boys that I represent loud and proud. Not like right now or the last few years where they kind of been like, yeah, I'm a Saint fan. So yeah, I'm a masochist.
But also, you can't put down what the Falcons are doing right now. Bijan Robinson, their run game with him is stellar right now. If they can put together a solid passing game and they can put together a much better defense, that team will start being put together. I don't know what the long-term goal for the Buccaneers is just yet. I know that they have a decent defense, and I think you need to build around the people you already have on offense. You know, you have Mike Evans is a great target for Baker Mayfield. Is Baker Mayfield your long-term starter? That's the other question. And so there's a lot of big players in this whole scenario. Davante Adams jumping to the Saints would turn the tide. Then the Falcons and the Buccaneers would need to follow that up with another big, well, they have another weapon. We need another weapon. And then, you know, all of a sudden it becomes stacked. So I don't know.
All right. And with that, we're going to move to our final division, the NFC West, where I know their stats. I still say they're not the best team in the NFL just based on stat. I still think that goes to the Eagles, but leading the division with 5 wins and 0 losses are the San Francisco 49ers, followed by the Seattle Seahawks, who haven't been doing quite bad, 3-1, followed by the Rams, 2-3, which is very disappointing for former Super Bowl winners. And then finally, you have the NFL Purgatory, the Arizona Cardinals, 1-4. Honestly, I don't have to ask you what the team that's going to lose that division. We already know that. But out of those two teams, the 49ers and the Seahawks, because you know what? I like the Seahawks a little bit better. I think they're going to win their division. I think Right now, Brock Purdy's doing pretty good, but I just don't see them being that good of a team. I know I'm in the minority on this, but it's just, for me, there's something about that team that I just don't think they're a good winning team, if that makes any sense. But what do you think?
I think you are fucking blind. And I sent you a post today how Brock Purdy in the regular season is undefeated. This is a 15-game winning streak that he has strung together. And you don't have it in you to just give him, as they say in wrestling, or as they have been saying in wrestling recently for whatever reason, you're not giving him his flowers. You can say what you will. The 49ers are the most complete team. And it pains me to say it as a Raider fan, because usually the 49ers are one of our biggest rivals. That's why we never play them, because the games turn out so ugly. But the 49ers are the most complete team in the NFL. You have a great defense. You've got offensive weapons galore. You have Deebo Samuel. You have Christian McCaffrey. You on the defensive side of the ball, you have Nick Bosa. And then Brock Purdy is the cherry on top. Now, is Brock Purdy a good quarterback by himself? I don't know. But he's working very well under Kyle Shanahan's system. And so I think that these guys are my number one contenders for the Super Bowl. The number one. The top. Now, what Geno Smith is doing with the Seahawks is great. We're missing something. What is it? They need to plug those holes that they're missing. Maybe we can see them competing against the Niners realistically for that title division. And if you remember a couple years ago, we said the Rams were the most complete team in the NFL. Look how things have kind of changed. They're still good. They have a lot of talent on that team. You have Matthew Stafford. You have Puka Nakawawa, or whatever his name is. He came out of nowhere. He was Cooper Kupp's replacement while Cooper Kupp was hurt, and he's doing fantastic. Now Cooper Kupp's back. You add that to the mix. On top of a defense with Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey. I think Jalen Ramsey is still there. I don't know where he's at now. But they have a great defensive line. And then you got the Cardinals. And the Cardinals are the Cardinals. There's nothing else to say there. I think the number one team in that division, by a long shot, and I do say by a long shot, not putting down the Rams and the Seahawks, but look at what they did to the Cowboys. And I mean, I know the Cowboys are the Cowboys, but the Cowboys are coming off of a big margin win against the Patriots. If you're kind of looking at it, the Patriots suck. Cowboys are in the middle of the card, and they put their foot on the throats of the Cowboys and just walked all over them. I think 49ers are the team to beat this year. And it's going to be really interesting if that NFC Championship game comes down to the Eagles and the 49ers. I'm all for that. I will pay money to see that game if I have to, because that's going to be great.
If it does come down to those two final teams for the NFC Championship, I will also watch it, because I will be very interested in it.
I will be excited to say, I told you so. And vice versa. You will be excited to say, I told you so, if the Eagles win. So
exactly. Now, something to point out is how I hate saying this with every bane in my body, but isn't it interesting how as soon as Jimmy G was out, and Brock Purdy wasn't the first string backup quarterback, he was the third one, but as soon as Jimmy G though was out of that team from that injury and then being let go, isn't it funny how he leaves and all of a sudden they're working, they got something cooking? That's interesting. And he goes to the Raiders and everything goes down. I mean, of course, you got McDaniels, like we've been saying, but I think it's also very interesting. And then you look at the Carolina Panthers, who got rid of Baker Mayfield, and now he's with the Buccaneers, and they're at the top of their conference. Granted, we don't know if they're going to last at the top, but I think it's quite interesting how some of those quarterbacks who people touted to be so great go to another team, doesn't work. And then those quarterbacks that everybody's wondering, why does he still have a job? And now they're working with another team. I mean, Matthew Stafford is the biggest example of that. 10 years with the Lions, and then he goes and wins the Super Bowl with the Rams. we've been running long, so we're going to move on to the Formula One race review of the Qatar Grand Prix. Now, this track, it's been raced by Formula One in the past once, and that's in 2020, I do believe, 20 or 21, when the whole COVID pandemic was going on and they couldn't fly over and Qatar was ready and they went and raced there. It wasn't that great of a race back then, but this year around, god damn, it was a complete 180 from the previous race. It was a sprint weekend, and surprisingly, and this is the most shocking thing, Max Verstappen did not start first for the sprint race. He started a little ways back, and the man who did start first and who did win the sprint race was the rookie who nobody knew if he was going to pan out, Oscar Piastri. Now, it's not a Grand Prix win, so it doesn't mean the same as winning a regular race. But Oscar Piastri beat Lando Norris for that win, for a win just in general. I think that is very interesting because Lando has come so close. The closest he came to was Sochi 2021, where if the rain hadn't happened, there might have been a chance that he could have kept Lewis Hamilton back and won that race. He was so close to it, but in his inexperience, he decided to stay out when Lewis pitted, and he thought he was going to be able to keep going enough to pit for intermediates and immediately go back on the track ahead of Lewis and win, but he didn't, and he fucked up. He hit the wall, and he limped back home. He got a new wing, and he was on the inners, but by then it was done. And then in the interview after the race, you could feel it, man. You could see him, and he was disappointed. He was kicking himself down. And now that he has a machine that in certain tracks, they can fight Red Bull, he didn't perform. And it's like, what the fuck? You got Oscar Piastri, who has been amazing this season, and they've gone from being one of the worst teams on the grid to being the best of the rest, ahead of everybody else except the Red Bulls. And now Oscar won the sprint race. And a lot of people are saying, well, obviously the championship is not up for grabs anymore. Max Verstappen has sealed that championship. After the sprint race, he was actually given the championship, and he was actually given first position on the podium for the car and all that instead of Oscar, which it's kind of sad. A lot of people didn't like that. But Max is the world champion. He officially beat Checo Perez, who did not finish the race again. But I just think it's so amazing how Oscar in his rookie year is able to do that, do something that not a lot of people have the chance to do it. Especially when you consider that at the start, we were like, what the fuck is McLaren doing? And now people are saying, all right, so we're not going to win. Like, we may win a race, hopefully, but we'll get a lot of podiums. We'll get a lot of points. They're not going to finish second in the Constructors' Championship because there's such a huge margin between them, Ferrari, and Mercedes. But they may end up being higher than Aston Martin, which, again, Aston Martin started good. This week, it was fucking ridiculous. Lance Stroll did not get out of Q3 during qualifying. And when he got out of the car, the cameras didn't fully catch it, but they caught him making a tantrum. He threw his steering wheel out, which those steering wheels are like $250,000 a piece. Right? They're very expensive. But he did that, and then later on, he went and he shoved his training coach, I believe. And a lot of people are saying, this is no way to behave as an adult, throwing these tantrums. And then during the Grand Prix, he didn't do any well. And when they asked him about qualifying, he just cussed and said it's a fucking joke and all that. And then he just answered one worded. And not like Kimi, who Kimi would say one or two words and, everybody would laugh and it's like, that's just Kimi. Yeah, well, it's not even gimmick. It's part of the Kimi charm. But Lance, a lot of people are saying, does Lance Stroll have it in him to really race anymore? Because he's not good. And we all know the reason why he has a job in Aston Martin. It's not because of what he's capable of doing. Instead, it's because of his dad. His dad owns the team. And there have been points where Lance Stroll has said, I don't know if I really want to do this. For lack of better words, that's what he said. So there's that whole debacle going on. And then the Grand Prix was very interesting because the FIA mandated that all the teams must do 3 pit stops each tire cannot go further than 18 laps. And there was a lot of chaos during the beginning of the race. George Russell, who came out in P2, and Lewis Hamilton in P3 for the qualifying, Russell took out Hamilton in the first turn. Now, it wasn't a malicious thing. Russell didn't see him, and he just, when they went, they turned, and Lewis should have probably not have stayed too close to Russell, but it was a racing incident, and Lewis was out. But throughout the race, there was a lot of battles and a lot of people being up high. And then there was a huge disappointment with Checo Perez, who after the race got a time penalty for exceeding track limit, ended up being P10. And then you have Max Verstappen, who won the Grand Prix. And then second and third was Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. Now a lot of people are saying, look, we know Red Bull is going to keep Checo till the end of the season at the very least, because they want that 1-2 finish. But I don't know if they're going to get that, because Checo, it's just so disappointing seeing him, like the first 3 races of the season, he won, and we're like, holy shit, Checo might finally fight for a championship. He might make a challenge for Max Verstappen. But ever since then, Checo has just been in it, and he's been nosediving, and it's sad seeing. And quite honestly, I was just under the mindset, just give him time. Just let him learn this new car. Let him figure it out. At this point, I believe the best course of action is to get rid of Checo. He does not work under Red Bull, and we know it's not the car because we see what Max does with that car. And we've seen what other teammates have done. We have Carlos Sainz, who unfortunately did not start the Grand Prix due to a fuel issue, but he's beating Charles Leclerc in the driver's standings. He's been the better driver. He won the Singapore Grand Prix, the first F1 driver to win a Grand Prix since Brazil last year when George Russell won. That's how long this Red Bull dominance and mostly Max Verstappen dominance has been. But we see like teammates being equal with each other in terms of performance and getting the most out of the car. Some tracks, Charles gets a little bit more performance out of it than Carlos. But for the most part, Carlos has been doing a lot better. And we see that with Mercedes, it's the same thing. We see that in Williams, Alex Albon is carrying this team and Logan Sargent is not. And speaking of Logan Sargent, he actually had to quit the race. Like, I think it was like during the midway point, because at Qatar, it was so hot and humid that Lance Stroll, and I do feel bad for Lance Stroll for this case, because this is not on him. This is just on the conditions of the track. He said that during the high-speed corners, because of how dehydrated, how hot he was actually passing out during those high-speed corners. A lot of the drivers were not coping well. Esteban Ocon actually said that he threw up in his helmet after lap 15. And George said that he wanted to quit the race after 6 laps. And he's like, dude, it's fucking intense. And a lot of the drivers, especially Alex Albon, they actually went after the race and went to the doctor. Alex didn't even tell his team that he was going to the doctor because he just felt so bad. Lance Stroll, and this is funny, Lance actually stopped his car right in front of an ambulance. And he's like, after the race ended, and he's like, I just got to seek medical attention. So in a nutshell, that was the F1 race. But there was a lot of goods. There was a lot of battles, and there was a lot of downs as well. Like I said, Checo, Lance Stroll, it's very ridiculous seeing all these teams with a lot of potentials being held back. And I think with Checo's case, it's just Red Bull is not his team. He worked well when they needed him, and now that they need him to perform well, to get podiums, he's incapable of. And I think it's time for him to go. But the thing is, who are they going to bring up? Daniel Ricciardo has already been said to be driving AlphaTauri next year. And Daniel's coming back this next race in Austin, Texas. Liam Lawson, unfortunately, this was his last race of the season. But maybe if Checo just keeps on getting worse and worse, at the end of the year, if Daniel does well, they might say, all right, Checo, we're going to release you a year early. Daniel, you've done good enough to go back to Red Bull Racing. Liam, we got a seat for you, son. We're not going to wait until 2025. We're going to put you in for 2024. But yeah, what do you think about that?
The decline of Checo has been disheartening. I mean, we haven't been able since, and I don't even think we were recording early in the season where we were able to say, vamos Checo. It's not even worth yelling anymore. it's almost mind-boggling because we saw how good he was doing early in the season. We saw how good Aston Martin was doing early in the season. Now the whole script has flipped. Now we're looking at McLaren being close to maybe that number 2. If we're looking at next year, we're looking at McLaren maybe being that number 2 team right behind Red Bull. And Aston Martin, I think Lance Stroll is holding Aston Martin back. Not Aston Martin is holding Lance Stroll back. I said that correctly. And I know his daddy is owner of the team or whatever, so he can pitch a fit and he can act like a kid and not really get punished for it. I don't know if he got fined or whatever, but, you know. And I saw the footage of him reportedly shoving his medical or, you know, shoving somebody. And it didn't really look like, I couldn't really tell if he shoved anybody or not. It just looked like he hit the wall or whatever. But regardless, you know, I get that you're frustrated, but that's not the way to present yourself, dude. You want to do that shit, go back to Formula 4. Even then, you know. But I'm really curious because the big story early this year was Fernando Alonso and how good he was doing and how promising he was looking. Do you do a complete swipe of everybody and just get 2 new drivers in completely if you're Aston Martin? And then Ferrari is Ferrari. We've said it for forever. Ferrari fucks Ferrari. They just do. Carlos Sainz is a magnificent driver, and I think he's had more success in the Ferrari than Charles Leclerc has. And Charles Leclerc is supposed to be your number 1 guy. But I think it's time for Charles Leclerc to start looking at another team. If he wanted to go to Aston Martin and they were looking to clean the slate, I think that'd be a good fit because it's a good car. We saw it early in the year. Now, whether it's a good car now or not, you know, is obvious. It's not, but it's a good car, and I think it's a decent system. It's just Lance Stroll is letting Aston Martin down. Now, the other thing I'm thinking is, what if? Because we're assuming the number 2 seat at Red Bull is going to be open next year. And you think they're going to put Liam Lawson in. Not Liam Lawson. Daniel Ricciardo. Okay. Now that makes more sense. Imagine if they did put Liam Lawson in. But and that's the other thing. Liam Lawson, could he perform better in that car than Checo? Maybe. You can't do much worse than what he's doing now. You can't be any worse than The Godfather 3 either. I don't know. There's going to be a lot of changes next year. I can already tell. And we're already starting to look to next year since our World Championship has been sealed. Constructors Championship has pretty much already been sealed. And we need to start looking to who's going to drive for who. Andretti's not coming in next year. No, they're coming in 2026. That's right. Maybe. We'll see. What about Audi Sauber? 2026. Okay. 2026 is going to be a big year. But what if you went double veteran if you're Aston Martin? You hear what I'm thinking? You hear what I'm thinking here? Fernando Alonso and Seabass Vettel. But that's the thing. They're both past their prime. So I don't know. Well, and Vettel, I think Vettel might be in better racing shape than Alonso. And that's saying something because Alonso, well, I mean, he's younger, a lot younger. So I don't know. It'll all be really interesting to see how everything plays out. But we're basically already looking to next year.
Honestly, I think we should just be looking for 2026. Aston Martin, one of the big things about it is Lawrence Stroll. Say what you want about the man. He's 100% behind Aston Martin, and he is putting in a lot of money. They're having a new wind tunnel built. They're having new facilities built and all that. He has a mindset like he understands in order to win in Formula One, you have to have the best skier, the best technician, and he has a lot of great people. We saw what happened in the beginning of the season with that car. I think the issue was they put all their baskets in for development for early this year, and just they didn't have enough resources to make a great package continuing on forward. And we said this before we took our hiatus, that time will tell if Aston Martin will be able to keep the developmental war going on. They haven't. But that doesn't mean we should give up on them. I disagree with you saying that Alonso is past his prime because he is getting the absolute most out of that car. and it has been a phenomenal just seeing what he can do. Now, he's starting to show a little wear down because of how they're not able to perform. Yes, he is. But I think Alonso is also willing to give them a shot in the long term. He sees what can be done, and behind the scenes, he's seeing what we don't see. He's seeing how they're trying to get better. Sometimes the upgrades don't work. That's just the truth of the matter. But I think that in 2024 and 2025, we'll start to see a different Aston Martin, one that is akin to the earlier one, but better. But I honestly think that Lance Stroll has to go because the gap between him and Fernando when it comes to points is ridiculous. It's the same as Max and Checo. So before we leave, let's check on the score. So can you tell us the score for the Raiders and the Packers, even though people will already know the final score by the time this episode releases?
Yes, as it stands, as we're recording right now, it is halftime and Raiders are leading the Packers 10-3. Is it bad that I just texted my father. I said, is it bad that I hope that we lose this game just so we have a reason to fire Josh McDaniels? And hoping that we wake up tomorrow morning with the good news. And he was like, well, yes. But yeah, anyway, if we don't have anything else to talk about, if you want me to sign us off.
Sign us off, white boy.
Thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Waterboy Experience. We hope that you enjoy it when it finally releases, whenever it will, Friday. Tune in every Friday to hear a new episode of the Waterboy Experience. You can find us on Spotify or wherever else you find your favorite podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at the Waterboy Pod, or someday. No. Well, actually, so the story is I shouldn't plug the Instagram anymore because I don't remember the login for it. You have the login for it? Okay. So we'll plug the Instagram at some point. I believe it's the Waterboy EXP. And at the Waterboy Pod on TikTok. Segments of the show will at some point be posted on the TikTok with artwork. Probably it's going to be AI generated images. Those are always fun to play with. And we have a couple of them in the works right now. We're going to pull from some episodes that we did just a couple weeks ago. And we're going to start posting clips on the TikTok. With that, peace.
Second and goal just outside the 10. Carr tips it in, and it's Ward. He spins into the end zone for the touchdown.